Sometimes the hardest mission is when you have to adapt to a new role. From starting a first responder career to a new assignment to retirement, Greg Fernia is here to help. Greg is a retired special operations supervisor and a personal and professional development coach. He helps first responders and their families navigate transitions and challenges with purpose and clarity. Learn more at livingthegoodlifecoach.com. That's livingthegoodlifecoach.com. We talk a lot about fixing what's broken in this job, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do as a leader is just to see what's already going on right. Know Your Force is a simple system that sends a quick text survey to the people you interact with. It's helping leaders see the good their teams are already doing, back their people with real data, and step in before stress turns into burnout. Learn more at knowyourforce.com.
Yeah, I always admire you guys too, because you come into work and when you clock in, you got to be suited and booted.
You're absolutely correct. To be responsible, to be safe, you have to be turned on as soon as you pull out of your driveway. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities.
All right, Eric. Thanks for coming on, dude. Really appreciate you.
Man.
I love collaborating with police officers, and we have the same type of career, but it's different.
Same, but different. Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. I think especially with like how jarring the quote unquote lifestyle and career is. It's like not a normal life. It's not exposure to normal things. You don't interact with your family the same kind of normal-ish way. But yeah, shout out to the brothers and sisters in red as well. Yeah, I mean, I tested for both. I'm like that kind of category where I was like, I just want to serve. I tested for both. I scored way better with fire up here in Washington State, 93% kind of thing. But people that have been in the service for a while know that 93 generally doesn't cut it. You got to be like 98, 99 back then. So anyway, fast forward 18 years, I'm a cop and I've held a lot of hats and it's been good. It's been a good ride.
Man, things have changed recently. Like as far as hiring new people, like there's something different with this newer generation. I think after 2020, the lockdown, it created this paradigm where people were like way more averse to wanting to be a first responder because of, the risk you put yourself in. And with all the mayhem that had occurred, I'm sure you guys relate with the whole George Floyd thing and like defunding the police. It was just a wild experience. But now that we're hiring, it just seems like less competitive. When I was trying to get hired, it was like you had to hit that 100% on a test score or you weren't even looked at. So it was just like, it was a crazy competitive thing where you're taking the top 10 off that list for different departments. And it was challenging, man. I remember so many letters I got in the mail where it was like, thank you for your time, but no, thank you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I got the one letter that was a decline and no one else bothered to mail me back for fire back then. But yeah, that's something I was aware of in the last handful of years. I worked in recruiting as a sergeant, like post Floyd. And so that was arduous, but we got it done with the team and trying some new things. But at the same time, I was interacting with our local fire counterparts, and they're like, people aren't showing up the same way, right? And like they felt like it wasn't like dropping standards, but they had to go deeper into the pool and really had to actively recruit, that was like never a thing, especially after 9/11 and different aspects like that. But I don't know if you guys talk about a lot in the service, at least from the first responder content that I see on the police side. A lot of it's like, if you're just out in public, like you're just at this higher level of danger, like you could be a barista and all that and be exposed to with the mental health crises going on, but also like firefighters being ambushed, like more and more it seems, and that's super jarring, right? Like I think like our forefathers and sisters would be like, firefighters really got to wear a vest that says fire, like boldly. At the same time, like ambushes happen to cops, they happen to firefighters, but y'all aren't armed, and so that's a increased challenge. But I think you're accurate in pointing out the COVID aspect too, and I think people really value their flexibility and their personal autonomy with their career and how they show up. And you can't do that. You can't work from home in first responder work, right? So it's a different paradigm for sure.
Yeah, dude, I totally agree with you on that. And one of the weird things too was I remember like right after 2020, some departments in LA County region, they were offering like these dividends, like if you apply, we'll give you like $25,000 on a house and like a
Hmm.
$50,000 like a bonus to even just apply. And then like if you get the job, which was insane. Like I've never heard that in my life, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
And you're totally right too. Like we are very vulnerable when we go into people's homes. We expect that we are in this state of mutual trust when we go into someone's house. But there's been moments in LA City where guys where there's a door that's cracked and we go inside someone's home and someone has a gun that's cocked and they fire and it's like insane. I think even
Hmm.
a couple years ago there was a Long Beach fire captain who got shot and killed right down the street from my house when they went into this so-called fire that was going on, and there was some live rounds that were shot off. It's just like you never know what's going to happen. It's a very high risk.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where you see more and more like co-response models. I mean, it's like I work in a pretty high crime, high incident area, and so it's very common for fire to stage. And yeah, there's all the memes and jokes, but like truly, that's what makes sense. Like when you're going into someone where things are uncertain, a situation where things are uncertain and people are in crisis, like you never know what you're going to encounter. And so that's the jarring, unfortunate nature of it. But it's really some of these bad actors, as you could call them, are creating this dynamic where it's just not safe for people that want to serve. They want to put themselves out there, but they're not prepared fully to do that. And so we need this collaborative effort, right? Like we need fire, EMS, police, mental health workers. Like we need them all kind of combined and kind of hybridizing in a lot of incidents. So I think that's what the uh, the general public doesn't understand is like some of the negative narratives like, oh, we just need more of this tool for that problem. It's like, well, it's a lot more complicated and dynamic than that. Like I wish it was so simple sometimes.
Yeah, I always admire you guys too because you come into work and when you clock in, you got to be suited and booted, ready to go. That is not the case for me. I have to just show up and just walk my ass into the station, and we can put our turnouts on when we go on a call. But it's like it's just kind of crazy. You guys, I have utmost respect for you guys. We to be clean shaven, ready to go. Your vest all ready to basically start your entire whatever 12 hours usually it is, right? And I don't have to do that. It's a kind of one of those things, but um, much amount of respect. And just recently, man, I went to go shoot some guns, and I'm not a big gun guy,
Hmm.
and I was just had this realization with myself with shooting a gun. I was like, man, there's so much power in this
Yeah.
device, and
Hmm.
you guys have to feel comfortable and safe, and have to rely on yourself when you need to use that. And it's just like a very awe-inspiring thing. And I think that's one of the different dynamics with you guys. You guys have a lot of power in your hands, and I think with that comes a lot of responsibility. I'm sure someone had said that to you, but I think there's something in a police officer's like mental construct that is different with firefighters when they deal with mental health stuff because of that responsibility, that power. And unless it's cultivated well and properly, I think that can change someone. And I'm sure you've seen that throughout your career where, someone's persona, it becomes like highly identified with that power, with the
Hmm.
lack of responsibility that they failed to carry because of just the loss of translation through being in a career. And so many police officers who I had talked to who's in this kind of the mental health model of a police officer, they do have this construct within themselves that's really hard to kind of crack. And I've helped a very large amount of LAPD officers where, man, they're just holding on like this hardened case.
Hmm.
And they have to do that to protect themselves, but it's hard to unleash the chains of that. at like a metaphysical idea construct. I don't know if that does that resonate at all with you?
Yeah, it really does. And I think that like where you started, where my head was at was like the hypervigilance that fire deals with as well, right? And then so we noticed anecdotally like a huge change in how people showed up at work and how they interacted with each other when we went to take home cars, right? It was kind of the norm and it was to be marketable. It actually, for people that are curious, it does save local government money because the cars are they're not driven like 24/7. They're maintained. People take a little more care when they're not sharing it, like just getting it gross and driving it too hard because they get to check it out and pick up a new car if it burns in the ground. So all to say, when we went to that, it's like you're absolutely correct. To be responsible, to be safe, you have to be turned on as soon as you pull out of your driveway, and you have to be turned on all the way until you get your car into the garage or behind the house or sometimes on the street where you park. You just don't know. And there's even common practices like you need to be aware. You need to have your radio on. You need to have your gear on. You need to be aware of like cars that are appearing to tail you and kind of follow you for awkwardly long. Like you should key into that because you don't know. And it's not like all just the boogeyman. Like there's a few years ago where I counted 3 incidents in my county area where even an unmarked car was basically road raged with. And unmarked cars they're pretty obvious. They got the spotlight, they got all that, the antennas and stuff, but either road raged and or shot at or toward, like and one car got hit, and that was a marked car in the city just next to mine, right? So, all to say, the hypervigilance is real, and I think you're accurate too with regard to. I guess I wanted to say one more thing with the hypervigilance is like fire's not immune to it either, right? Just like you could be targeted on a call, like you could be getting supplies for for your meals, and then you just don't know who you might encounter at the local grocery store. Like, are they in crisis, or do they have a bone to pick because they see a blue uniform and that's authority and they react a certain way? We had an incident in my city that my guys responded to, and there was a person in distress that went to the fire department in the middle of the night because they're in distress, but she was armed, she was suicidal, and then so they had to figure out, and we had to kind of navigate this pseudo lockdown. Like, can we evac? Should we shelter in place as we're responding to the parking lot? Like, that's super jarring. Like, I don't know any firefighters locally that had encountered that, but to have a lot of conversations after the fact of like how jarring that is. Like, how do you plan for that? How do you maintain comms with dispatch and people inside? They're basically potentially kind of bystanders of violence in that case. But yeah, going to like the persona, I think that's absolutely a thing. We go through rigorous backgrounds, but you never catch them all. And I do think that there's something with the energy that people come into with wanting to be police officers. I do believe, and most cops believe, that the majority of people are very well intended. However, I think it's slippery, right? And it's like a lot of us come into it because we hate the bullies of society. But there's that like Nietzsche quote where like he who looks into the abyss has to like the abyss stares back, right? Or he who fights monsters has to ensure that he doesn't become a monster, to paraphrase. I think that unless your values are very dialed in and you have these intentions to revisit them and really refine like beyond like just words, but like what do your values look like as you play them out in life? It gets really slippery, right? You're dealing with these really nasty people doing nasty things, and I've dealt with that, right? That's why I have the reflections I do, and that's why I feel so strongly about it and having built curriculum around that, like that mindset. And where do the values live, and where are they with you beyond the badge, beyond the job? Because if not, like it's super pervasive, right? Like you're dealing with these really scummy people at times. Not most people. Some people just make mistakes, and I get that. But you deal with these people doing really terrible things to terrible people, and then you have to combat them, sometimes literally, and then it kind of slips into this thing where you adopt these personas to bully the bully, but now you're the bully, right? And then now people are calling for service, and they don't need to get bullied, but there's a cynicism that takes over and kind of this toxic energy sometimes that not intentionally, but you just kind of become this like, why are you inconveniencing me with this? And you're talking down to people. And I say it from a place of like recognition and humility. Like I've been there, and that's why I say these things. I know it makes a lot of cops uncomfortable. I'm sure it might make some firefighters uncomfortable because I've been on calls in the middle of the night where these guys are fatigued, guys and gals, and they're saying these things and kind of spinning up the person we're with, and we're like, oh, holy cow, like hold like step back, we got it. At the same time, we've been those people too, where we got to tap each other out because of the emotional dysregulation. So I know I threw a lot of things out there, but I think it is important that we like kind of look in the mirror and realize like because of the things that you share and teach about, like what does wellness mean? Well, it's like it's something that we really have to put a lot of effort and intention into to make sure that we are course correcting. These things are just human, right? But they can clearly get far out of whack.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I love to kind of just, always like break down like our consciousness because it's so different from the regular person.
Mm,
So like just the idea of hypervigilance, that was a new concept that's been recently thrown out where everyone was like, holy shit, I am like that. I am constantly being in a state of awareness to where it's high functioning anxiety.
mm,
And that high functioning anxiety is just you're constantly in this state where you can't relax. And it's dormant and it really sneaks up on you until you have a large amount of time on, like up to 10 years. Usually around that, I think people actually understand what's happening, especially once they start establishing a family at home and they realize like this doesn't work when I am acting like this in front of my family, and they realize it's self-destructive. That's what I think is really kind of showing up for people individually. And I think it's been really helpful for podcast designed for first responders so they don't feel alone and isolated in
mm,
that way, because you're not alone. Everyone's dealing with that. And I'm speaking from personal experience where I still work on myself like at a very intricate, in-depth level, and I'm still regulating that mind activity where I'm constantly thinking. I'm like, I have to catch myself and use a bit of more direct consciousness with it, conscious intent, where like, okay, I have to stop and then shift this state I'm in into being at rest or being calm at home. Because when I'm in a parenting role and wearing that mask, it doesn't work. It just fires back in my face. So
mm,
I think it breaking down like the way we behave is like kind of fundamental too, because our behavior reflects everything that's going on internally. And you're exactly right. I don't know how many times especially when I was working in really busy assignments, I would be short fused. And I remember there was one time became even more short fused because of the leadership that
mm.
was in charge, because
Yeah.
the leadership was actually rubbing off on me in a really bad way. Until I had a really good friend of mine tell me, dude, you're being an asshole. Like, why are you being like that? And
Hmm.
when he was stepping up and being a really good friend, I had realized what had happened to me. And so I think there we not to just judge and to constantly like I guess overly criticize each other, but just kind of being like a mirror for others and helping others to see like, hey, this is out of hand. You know what I mean? But we're afraid sometimes to even speak up to our friends and colleagues because we don't want to cause some type of conflict. But I'm happy that my friend mentioned that to me, dude, and I'm a different person because of it. So the breaking down of like our conscious thing, I always love to see like why did we behave this way? Where did it start? And like how did this build up to this state? And I think for you guys, I think like I was mentioning, like I think over time, like even though you did backgrounds and things like that, there's so many categories and things that are like triggering these little small paper cuts within us,
Mm.
over time, it just starts getting at you. So I don't know if that had resonated with you or not.
Yeah, for sure. The first thing I was smirking when we were talking about being called out as an asshole, and like I had like the same story, and it was actually a buddy, a housemate, right? So he wasn't a cop, but I was living with some college buddies as I was a new, younger individual after college. But it was like I was working, as you said, like with kind of a toxic group. You talked about how leadership can rub off, and you are the average of the people you spend a lot of time with, unless you're really intentional to adjust that in some way. But I was with this pretty like old school, pretty salty crew, and I was new, and I just sponged it up, right?
Mhm.
And I've talked to some of my peers, that I work with now, and I can positively say that a lot of us have just a more healthy outlook and a more like people focused, service oriented outlook than we were in at the time. But it was just like in the middle of the night, you're working graveyards, you're underslept, you're overstressed, all these things that don't, they're not excuses, but they certainly don't help. And then everyone's an a-hole, right? Like everyone that you're dealing with in public, there's only, scumbags out here this time of night, which is absolutely not true. Like a lot of people just work nights and they're commuting and all that. But to be called out and be extremely defensive to it, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And, or like, no, you're the a-hole. He's like, no, you're an a-hole. Like you're changing. And it's all the stuff that, the academy I came into, we were learning about that. So it's not like it was totally a time before these awareness points of needing to quote unquote live outside the blue world is what we say in policing, right? Like, so maintain your healthy relationships and your hobbies and the things that aren't your job because you can't be your job. But I was making everything my job, right? And I was looking at everything through this lens of everyone out there's evil and or trying to hurt me or somebody else until I can prove otherwise, which is just not a healthy way to live, right? It's very corrosive to the psyche. So I'm trying to bring back to maybe where you're at with like the consciousness of like, I think you're asking, can you clarify, like you're asking kind of what contributes to these things in our consciousness?
Yeah, like well, just understanding like our consciousness, because we will hear from all these different therapists and things like that with in reference to like behavioral health awareness, and like some therapists will come up and talk to us and be like, you guys need to be mindful and like all these things, and like it just goes past our heads because we don't
Mm,
understand it. So I want people to just be aware, like these therapists, they have a hard time connecting to us because we don't feel that connection on their part. They don't have that competency for our culture. So, but in general, in a general sense of breaking down our consciousness, because we're different from other people. Like for example, you just mentioned something that's really powerful: the fact that our worldview is different from a regular person, a regular civilian's worldview, because we
mm-hmm.
see different stuff, because we're in the underworld, in every dark alley of the city, and through the dark night. I'm sorry. Through like 3 a.m. Calls, we're just in the different states, so we see this world differently. So I guess like the idea is like for us to kind of break down that consciousness of what we carry, um
Mm-hmm.
and like the things that lead up to it, because I know you've been in this kind of awareness of mental health for police officers for quite some time, and I'm more built on like, yeah, we can understand and have some awareness for like a thing like hypervigilance, but what are the solutions? Like
Mm,
I want
yeah,
solutions for
yeah.
this stuff. I'm tired of hearing like an anatomy lesson on certain things, like how our brains are constructed and like how our nervous systems are. Like that's fine, but at this
Yeah.
point, like I want solutions with all this stuff.
Yeah, so where my mind goes, it's kind of like, yeah, I get the lesson, right? I get the lecture of like why is this happening, and the amygdala hijack or cortisol and all these things that are contributing, like, but so what now what? Like, what do I do with it? And so, for me, it's like, how are you aware? And then you gotta take pause and you gotta be curious. You gotta stay curious. I'm like, what do I feel about this? Why do I feel about this? Like, is there evidence of that? Is it actually true? And what I mean by that, it could be the example we just gave, right? Like, everyone out there is trying to hurt me. Like, there's more bad people out there than good people. I'm like, okay, why do I feel that way? Well, because I spend the majority of my waking hours in a job where I deal with a lot of people with bad things happening, right? Sometimes accidents, and a lot of times not accidents. And people do some pretty bad things to each other, and people they're in the end result of bad situations. Okay, is that the bulk of human experience? Is it more bad than good? What about for my life and my friends and all that? And like, well, no, probably not. It's like it's a disproportionate amount. And so then you continue to kind of peel back, like, why do I feel this way and how I'm adjusting this way, and why how do I feel at home? Do I feel safe? Am I on edge? Why is that? And all to say, with all those questions, I think they're really hard to ask yourself or even be aware to be in the space to ask them unless you take pause. And the biggest way to take pause is take time away from work, right? Like the hypervigilance cycle, where you don't come down from it, from Dr. Gilmartin's work, emotional survival for law enforcement. For the normal shift work, like you just don't kind of come back down to this like this state. Fire service might be different, but you're also going like, 1 to 3 days at a time. And then I know, we all know how much people pick up extra shifts, but unless you're actually removed from that stimulus. And for cops, it's like stop doom scrolling and watching all these officer involved shooting videos like on your time off. Like, yes, there are lessons to be learned, and yes, there are things to debrief with your crew to be safe and kind of pick that apart, but like not when you're about to go to bed and not on all your days off. Like there's a way to be responsible about your training and how to build tactics without letting it consume you. Um, it's taking vacation, right? It's getting out of the house, getting out in nature, and doing the things that you really enjoy with the people you care about. And it takes time and it takes intention. And for people that say they don't have time, I think we have to discard that narrative. Like we have to make it work. And then the day to day, if you think you don't have time, like check your phone. It usually tells you without you wanting to see like how much screen time you had that day. It's kind of jarring and kind of saddening sometimes, for probably even guys like us that build content. Yes, it's like a lot more than we'd care for, but for a lot of us, I think it's a ton of time that we could shave away and unplug and do the things that fuel and recharge us, right?
Yeah, I'm very happy the way you broke that down. And I love the fact that, you're kind of building these small little skill sets that are practical. Like just these small things of discipline, of just not doom scrolling, that's
Mm,
so helpful for your day by day. And it does not help your nervous system and your hypervigilance that you're constantly under this blue light and you're constantly scrolling through these whatever 30-second, 15-second videos constantly. I'm guilty of it, dude. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, me
I
too.
get
Yeah.
it. It's a thing, right? And I think as a collective of consciousness, we're dealing with that as well. But I think also in relation to like that doom scrolling, it's a part of our ability to disassociate, and our
Hmm.
disassociation is just wanting to escape this reality because we feel like we don't want to be in this moment because of we're at work, and we want to escape our bodies. We feel uncomfortable in our bodies, and we don't feel uncomfortable in our skin. So those are things, the hard truths to face. If you're on that bitter end where you feel uncomfortable in your skin, that's something that's a kind of like a marker for yourself. Like, hey, it's probably at the time for you to probably go to a therapist or even try to do some deep work on yourself, because that is like where you got to backtrack years of stuff that's been piling up on your plate. So I always tell people, if you want to start to have some idea of self improvement, like you just ask questions, as like you were mentioning. And the more you ask questions with that curiosity, it becomes like a sense of play with, hey, why am I this way? Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
so fucked up. Like, how am I going to fix this? And the answer is that there's really nothing to fix. It's more of like an excavation. And once you're, and I'm sure that you can relate to this, or any of these detectives when they're trying to fix a case or solve a case, they have a board and they start pinning small things on the board. So that map, it's a web. So your consciousness is really a web. It's this vibration set point to start changing things just by looking at what's the root cause. I am this way because of my dad. He behaved this way. I'm this way now. So you can change that with this conscious intent just by acknowledging the fact where it comes from. But does it take time? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But you going to a therapist could take years for you to start chipping away at that, but you can do it all the time. And I like to do this all the time with myself. And the best way I was able to do this was by asking myself, like, what something disturbs my consciousness or disturbs my reaction to things. That's my clue. That's my moment of entry where I can start seeing, hey man, this fucking disturbed me. Like, why did this disturb me? And usually it goes all the way traced back to childhood and the way I was raised and the way the doctrines and things I was the programmings that were placed into my consciousness at that age, because it carried it. And it's different for everyone else. And so I think that's kind of like the key point, is starting there.
Yeah, my mind goes a lot of places, and what you just said makes me think of like the shadow and the shadow work, right? And so I hope that people that tune into conversations like this, it can feel kind of overwhelming, right? Like you mentioned earlier, like, yeah, therapy, sometimes that's not the best entry point for people, especially if the cultural competency is lacking. It's like, but everyone's different, and every therapist and clinician's different, and it really just promotes this kind of like the peer support aspect of people that get what you're going through and they've lived what you're living, at the same time, like paired with a competent, like culturally competent clinician that you resonate with, right? There might be fantastic clinicians in my region that I just don't gel with. Just like, when you meet somebody in your same job or something, sometimes like you're like, oh, did we just become best friends just because you're at the same frequency, like you're on the same wavelength. So I think like a lot of that are pieces of that, but at the same time, like yeah, it's being curious because the energy of curiosity to me feels different than what we are predisposed to because we are high performers, because we're high drive individuals. We chose this career for altruistic reasons and we get after it. A lot of times with that type of nature brings this like this pressure and this almost self judgment a lot of times, right? Self blame of like, man, why am I this way? Oh yeah, because yeah, my dad treated me like garbage, so I treat me like garbage and I treat other people like garbage. It's like, well, there's a reframing opportunity there, right? And so you can stay curious. And one thing that I think is helpful is like looking at it like a story. And it's like I'm reading this book, Thomas More, and he's like a Jungian analyst, and he references like Joseph Campbell a lot, right? The power of myth, and it's almost this idea of thinking about your family, and every family is a bit dysfunctional in some way, right? But not to judge, but just to say, yeah, this happened, and look at it like storytelling and kind of like myth of like your predecessors, your ancestors. And so personally, I did have a really tough relationship with my dad, and I think that's what prompted me to seek law enforcement, policing, this very masculine type of work where it's about helping others and wanting to be a better example in my own vision of what like a man could or should be. At the same time, because of a lot of intention and work, like I don't blame him for the circumstance I had, but I also don't blame him for how he was. Like he had a really rough upbringing as well, that I sometimes can't even quite relate to. And so it's to say like, if I think about it like a story or like a myth, it's like, yeah, he encountered that thing and it shaped him this way and it passed on to me and it shaped me this way. However, I was able to grow through and integrate these things and forgive him and think about care and love and these more positive energies that really did bring us into this type of work. But we gotta throw some logs on the fire of that positivity because all the darkness can be so pervasive.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole concept has to be within a neutral space, because once we start creating, because we can create things in our mind that are unrelatable or they're not true, and that's really what harms us. I think in the end, because in we if we stay on neutral ground and we can observe and start to depict why we put meaning to something in the past, that gives that moment of recall for yourself to kind of see like, I can shift this perspective easily. But the only way I can do that is by being neutral. The moment I get my own emotional uproar within myself and overcomes my ability to kind of reshape something and reform something is really the trick. And so how do you become neutral in a situation? Well, that's a practice skill, is learning how to be neutral when you're on a call at work, learning how to be neutral when you're in a relationship and you're having a conflict, you're having an argument. So these are like the skill sets. And as soon as you start to cultivate that and start to grow from that experience, now you become a master at being neutral. So as you become more neutral, now you're able to move more neural pathways in the synapses in your brain just by sitting on your couch and asking yourself these questions. So these are like the things that we have to talk about, because if you don't have some type of structure for this, then there's no way then we can like grow and evolve off, all the ruts we've put ourselves into since birth.
Yeah.
And that's why I really believe like the more we can get out of the hypervigilant state, then we can actually be in a more neutral space, because it's really hard for men and women to do even meditation. And I know it's like that's something that's always brought up when a therapist comes in again. Hey guys, mindfulness, you should meditate. And everyone's like, fuck you, like get out of here. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm-hmm.
no one wants to do that. And because when we sit down, we have to like all these thoughts running around and we're not in a neutral space. So the more you can get your body out of stress, in my opinion, is the best way to become neutral. And then you can start to do this work. And so this is one of the key points here as well, is like this vibrational set point of When you start working on yourself, your life begins to change. This ripple effect within the quantum field starts to manifest. So, not only as you start making these small steps forward, your life will begin to change and others around you will start to change as well. That's the beautiful part about this. And it seems so like a one love concept, to save humanity, but it is very, very true. And I've watched it cultivate within myself and my family. But the hard part was when I needed to change habits, like my drinking, like the way I wanted to stay up late at night, eating late at night, all these things that were also feeding this beast that I had created within myself. And the moment we start to face that beast and make small changes is really where evolution starts to come. So, like, over time, I always tell people, like, in the behavioral health world, like, dude, it starts with each person individually. Like, each therapist, each person that's wanting to help you, your leadership, they will meet you in the middle. But unless you come out to meet them toe to toe, that's the only time you're going to experience change. Because all these guys and girls in our department, they explain, I have chronic pain. I have this, and that. I have hypervigilance. Okay, well, what have you done to change it? Is really the question I'm asking. And I always get the same response: nothing. You know what I mean? So I think that's where the hard truth starts to take its form, where everyone just turns their backs and walks the other way because they don't want to change their habits.
Yeah, it can be so overwhelming, right? Like the nothing is usually because I don't know where to start, and
Mhm.
sometimes it's the simplest things, right? Like be curious. Like you talked about meditation. Meditation's been really difficult for me for a lot of years, and I found versions that are working better for me. But for instance, like just sitting and being is tough, right? Like being without your phone is tough. Not listening to something, like working out and having to listen to something. So just trying to stretch that muscle, right? Like practice for me, this has been great, and it wasn't easy overnight. But like going on a walk, taking my dog out, going to walk to a park, or like going to walk through the simple trail without listening to a podcast, because it doesn't need to be quote unquote productive all the time, right? Without listening to music, just listening to the wind and the birds and my footsteps. Like I love it now. At first it was awkward. It felt really uncomfortable. And then when I'm not on call, to leave the phones behind, that felt paralyzing too, because I'm like, oh shit, what if something happens, right? Like I don't have my phone. I'm like, dude, I'll be fine. Like I'm in a generally safe area, and sometimes I'm armed, sometimes I have a knife, whatever. Like it's fine. I can run fast. Like, I can fight, whatever. But it becomes so like jarring to feel like this attachment to these things, these crutches of being present in the space. And so, I at the risk of sounding like self-promoty, like I for cops, like I've done wellness training. I've talked about that a lot. I talk about it ad nauseum. But I love what you said, that it starts with you. And so while I built this training and I kept adapting it for different audiences and presenting it, like I shifted it to be called Lead Yourself Well. And so the whole training, the majority of it's actually like diving into your mindset and identifying your value system, something we talked about earlier. Uh, but then like very little, it's kind of like the footnote is like, hey, things to think about, like eating mostly real food, minimally processed food, sleeping. Here's some sleep hygiene stuff. Here's some movement stuff, some different types of working out. Like that's like a minority of the whole thing, because it
Mhm.
mostly starts with you having to decide like what is the goal, what's your personal mission, like how do you want to affect the world, like, and that's not to be like change the world. That's just like how do you want to interact with the people and energies that you're around. Like how do you want to show up as a person, like what do you want your legacy to be, because I think that that does go to the space of like one world, one love, kind of this analysis of soul. And not to get too woo or deep on people, but like that is the thing. So as we get so micro and like, oh, I don't know what to do first, I don't know what workout to do, or like what to eat, or like what meal plan, or what to put in my smoothie. Like let's just like zoom out, right, and just look at how's life going? How are you interacting in your environment, in your neighborhood, at work? Like how are you interacting? How do you want to interact? Like how is that affecting you? Um, I'm curious, like, talking about that as you're kind of describing this this awareness piece and being neutral. I think that's the word you're using. Like, do you have a sense? Because I'm thinking about this a lot lately. Like, how do you zoom out and try to be neutral, a bit stoic in your approach, without being apathetic? Because I think that like some people seem to have mastered it, but you're like, ooh, that's not actually the thing we want. Like, you just don't care. Is that something you think about?
Yeah, it's a relationship with self. So that's really where it starts. Like it wasn't easy at first. You know what I mean? It was like with when I began this path, it was like everything within myself wanted to resist. And so that's where I started. It's like, why do I want to resist? And it's because of just change. It's the fear of change.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I start to build relationship with myself, things started to kind of shift because every part of me would just wanted acknowledgement for the pain and the suffering, the grief, and the lack of feeling emotion. And speaking for men, we have this aversion to feel emotion unless it's anger, which is masked by something deeper. So I
Mm-hmm.
think for myself, I check in with, what am I feeling? Like my emotions. Like, do I feel an emotion right now? And that's usually like the key point to being neutral. I can't be neutral if I'm in an uproar of emotions and it's just pouring out of me. So how can I calm down that emotion? It's just by acknowledging it and accepting it, really. Like acceptance is really powerful. And it's not like that you're trying to sweep something under the rug with acceptance. It's the fact that you're not letting it take its course and continue. You just give it and its acknowledgement. And there's some power with that. And so I think over time, it just came with the more like micro dosing selections of choice that started to change me. And the more I did that, then I started to realize like, okay, I acknowledge and accept that I'm feeling this way. Now I can feel neutral. And this is more of like, it's really a muscle, just like you had said too. It's just these small things that just need some attention and some focus and some discipline with. Because if you don't do that, they will run the subconscious and they will be in charge. Unless the way I kind of saw it was like all of these things, like if it's my inner child or if it's like my emotions that are running amok, they just need to walk next to me like you're walking a dog. You're training a dog, you got to make sure that dog's not in charge, but you're still a team when you're taking the dog on for a walk. And so that is kind of the relationship I set for myself, and it seems to work pretty damn good. It's a great analogy because when you try to train a dog and that dog's running the show, you look
Mm-hmm.
like a freaking idiot when you're going to the
Yeah.
park or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really a connection. It's really like an in-depth connection. There's almost like this telepathic experience, right? For anyone who has dogs that are listening, like they know that that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it comes with time. It comes with cultivation. It comes with relationship. And the moment you start to beat the dog, then it doesn't want to be your friend. So you can't use that method. The moment you start to stand in presence with authority and confidence, that's when things start to change.
Mm-hmm.
So that if you can kind of like depict that in your mind as like a construct, like that seems to be very helpful. But for someone to break that down, it's like, holy shit, that's like really bizarre. But at the same time, it works. But over the years, like I've had many great teachers, some of them spiritual, some of them working with, uh, either they were a police officer or a firefighter who are great leaders. And I would just be a student to everything. And so one of my teachers, she's works with a qigong master, and she teaches me human consciousness at like a crazy fundamental level.
Hmm.
So some of these practices I've learned have been through many teachers, and it was through me being in a state of humility. I had to bite really hard down on my humility for me to be in a receiving state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure it does. Yeah, I almost hear this tension of like, being a prior canine handler, like for sure you don't want the dog to walk you or run you, right? And you don't want to be fighting the dog because that's a thing. But it's like, I think you said it when you mentioned relationship, and then with that comes trust, right? Like
Mm.
investment and trust breeds security, like security in place. And so it's almost like, we talk about inner child or these energies or these like maybe these negative thoughts and narratives, like how do you walk alongside, like, hey, come along, we're on the same team. And it's like it's release. And I think for a lot of people the word surrender is hard to grapple with, but I think what you said was acceptance, which is essentially the same. Like it's just saying like, hey, like I don't have to fight every energy. It's almost like as much as we talk about ownership, as much as you've talked about ownership and starting with yourself, it's also to say like you can't fight everything, right? Like whether you like the metaphor of like surfing or paddleboarding, like to go with the current and be strategic about when to paddle, when not to. Like that's the thing. Like sometimes you got to paddle because it's worth it and it's your values, and like that's the hill you're gonna die on, metaphorically or literally. But then other times it's like, hey, I'm just gonna coast. I'm gonna be a passenger, and so that's something that I've been thinking about too. But that's what lately, and that's what's popped into mind when you're kind of sharing that. So I love how you put that all out, man. Are you looking for help with your rest and recovery, wanting to optimize your sleep and prime performance? Well, New Calm is built on neuroscience, and it's been used by special operators, SportTAC, pro sports teams, and many, many more for years. To learn more and access the best deals of the year, go to newcalm.co/grit. That's Newcalm, NUCALM.co/grit. This episode is sponsored by Hero Schedule. If your department needs better scheduling software that isn't outdated, clunky, and expensive, Hero Schedule is an easy switch. It's $4 per user per month, and they give you a free 30-day trial. Get started at heroschedule.com and click on Try Hero Schedule.
Yeah, I mean, it just takes time, dude. I did not sit in this seat by default. You know, it was a lot of grief, man, to get here. I guarantee when you come down this path of self-awareness and being a leader in your life, you'll come across so much grief, dude, so much hurt. And I've been through every single emotion, dude, and you have to get through that stuff. That's why we want to avoid it, because it's painful, man. It's really, really painful to start owning your own stuff, you know. And I think that's really how change starts to manifest, is when we take that first step of owning your shit. And I think this is just on a regular human based scale, you know, but for those who are in service, we are we burden ourselves by this double-edged sword. You know, we put ourselves in service and we forget to serve ourselves, and we see more of like this purpose-driven westernized way of living for us to be in a state of success. For me, I've changed and rewrote my meaning to what success is. To me, success is feeling inner peace, because you can have all these billionaires who feel still no inner peace. They don't feel a sense of self-respect. And so it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter how much status you have. Those are all masks trying to resolve a hidden issue, a void space that's not being filled. So I promise you, like, if anyone's listening, like, that all that stuff, it doesn't matter. I promise you that it doesn't. But the moment you start to shift things in your life, the other stuff becomes, you become an attraction to those things just because. That's the beauty of it. Like, it comes with no effort. And I think that's kind of like this, we're operating now off like universal law. Universal law, the way it manifests and co-creates your life. And as soon as you stop beating the river into submission, you start to use that medium, the very essence of the medium and the element of water, to float and to smooth and glide like effortlessly. That's how it works. And so if you start to learn how to swim, like if you're in this world, and you start just kicking and screaming and paddling, like, you're going to sink and you're going to exhaust yourself. So you got to really learn like the elemental of of the very medium in which you're gliding on. But to get there, it's tough, dude. I was kicking and screaming. I came here kicking and screaming, man, on this path, you know, because it came through all my addictions. It came through all my years of trauma I didn't want to face, you know, and it's just, it sucked. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome to like meet you here and hear this clarity, but I think it's a healthy reminder for so many that like this doesn't just happen. You don't just arrive, right? And like I have a lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes, and my passion about leadership and wellness and culture and like the first responder and police culture is because I've been in the suck. I've pulled myself and kept myself dwelling in the suck, right? And then to realize what was necessary to actually perform and thrive better, like to actually live and lead better. And it comes from all that reflection, right? You know, something you said made me think about how it's, you know, what's important, like what's truly important. And that can look a lot of different ways to different people, but I think most people will tend to agree that it's not money, it's not the stuff. But I heard this kind of guided meditation and it became quite challenging and really uncomfortable. And I'll explain why. Is because it was kind of walking you through like releasing, like you're imagining your life and then you're releasing different things, and they kind of preempt you to say, yeah, you're thinking about like getting rid of your possessions. And I think most of us are like, okay, cool, like it's just stuff, right? Like my house burned down and everyone got out, it's just stuff. But then we're thinking about like possessions. It's not just like the things you own. It's not just like your clothes. It's like imagine your car disappearing, imagine your house disappearing. And then it goes to like your titles, right? Like your
Mhm.
achievements. Like imagine your career. And that's like a hard one for us, right? In the service, as you said. So it's really tough transition point when people get injured mentally, physically, and they can't do the job. It's really tough transition when people are coming up on retirement. And I've heard many people very courageously say, I'm scared to retire. Like, I don't want to hang it up. I don't know what else. What am I going to do with myself? I don't know I'm going to occupy all my time and mental space with. And so that's a very honest, like, courageous thing to acknowledge and start working through. But then it's like, so many of us are like, well, it's my relationships. That's the thing, right? It's my family. It's my friends. What about those people being gone too? Because like whatever your belief system is, like there's some version of like they're not going to be here with you in this tangible physical world. And then so it's like, okay, then what are you if not your stuff, if not your titles, if not your job, if not your family relationships, if not your identity as like a father, a spouse, a partner, a kid, whatever. And then it just really invited me to think about like who am I at my core without my body, right? Like I pride myself in a certain level of fitness, but you know that's going to be a challenge as we get older. We're all going to get older at some point, and it's not gonna we're not going to be doing the things we love to do in some regard, right? And it's for me, it's like continuing to evolve that perspective and just think about that. But then also, I like how you put it, like you're making peace. Like your goal is peace, and so with that's acceptance and almost like simply just being, right? Like if you can just be in that state of peace and bring positive energy to the things you do, but also release the illusion or like necessity to feel like you can control all your outcomes because we certainly can't. Like we can influence them, which is one of the greatest concepts I really resonates with me with stoicism, especially for the type of work we do.
Yeah, that's a great skill, or a challenge with that meditation to like to realize all of your attachments and to see like what are the bare bones of who you are, and challenging like these people deem them as philosophical questions, but they're honest questions that we have to ask ourselves, because what happens when someone does retire, they deal with an identity crisis. They don't know what to do with themselves. And I just had an episode with a fire chief who just retired, and he dealt with that. And it was really devastating for him
Mm,
because he created so much identification with the title and so much identification with the career. And when he realized he was done, he didn't know what to do with himself. And so some people, if they don't catch themselves and realize, like as this starts to, over the years manifest itself, it's a very difficult attachment to release control of. And to release control is like it's also another skill set. It's like, how do I release control of all of my attachments? But that was a great question to ask yourself, because when you do scrape away at all these masks, at the very end, you have to ask yourself, who am I? And I pose this question for other people in a men's circle, and the question was, who are you? Do you know? And after you scrape away all these masks, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm
mm,
this, that, X, Y, and Z. Is that who you are? And it's really jarring to someone's consciousness.
yeah.
And so it came down to the point where like, and this was done with some pretty good friends of mine. So it came down to it. So for some friends are realizing like their attachment to even the self is really like how hard it is to like let go. And in the end, like it came down to us even going even further down the road of consciousness, where you go into a state of duality between polarization of the self. And then once you go past that, what is left? It's really nothingness. And I think for some of these like people who have these mystics in this world and throughout history and time who have traveled that ladder of consciousness, they realized at the very end there's this void space, which is the space of oneness and connection to everything. Once you come back down from that, you realize you're in connection. You're looking at someone else through their eyes, and they're a mirror and reflection of you because you have a soul and so do they. And so you're
Mm-hmm.
one and the same. And so there's this really changed concept of your worldview now that's completely depicted into your life where there is inner peace because of your release of attachment because you're the same as someone else looking right at you.
Yeah, that's a lot, man. Like I'm trying to keep up. I love it. It goes so deep and so high, like in these on both planes. But I think like why that's so jarring and why it's so necessary that we dive and we kind of dip and then not to like overwhelm ourselves, but like dip into those questions. Like sit quietly and be like, who am I if not a dad? Like it's the one thing I knew most clearly in my life that I wanted to be a father one day, and I am, and I my life is completely different in all these awesome ways because of my daughter. However, I have friends that have lost, right? They've suffered and grieved through the unbearable, the thought of losing their child, right? Like, and that is not all they are. They're not just a dad, right? It can't be, right? Just like you can mourn the loss of a career, you can mourn the loss of this, you can mourn the loss of your spouse through divorce or other unfortunate circumstances, death. It's like, but you carry on, like, and that's the really sad thing that I think, as depressing as it is, I think it's kind of a necessary reflection point so you can really get to the heart of like who are you and what are you here to do, what is your goal, like, what is your mission, your time in this world and your soul. And this is all newer stuff that I'm grappling with and trying to, I don't know if grapple's the right word, but trying to delve into and explore and learn with curiosity and grace. But it certainly helps me navigate life a little bit more gracefully. Like it helps me navigate my interactions at home or at work a little bit more gracefully and a little bit more, to steal your concept and your wording, like with peace. Um, think bigger beyond the dramas of leadership and what's going on in the workplace. Like, okay, like what are we all really here for? And is this just noise distracting us from what's more important? And it can be subjective, but I mean that's for purposely for all to discover and work through.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guarantee anyone who like wants to challenge themselves with those questions, you will show up differently in your world. Like if you're our first responder, if you're showing up to work, things start to click in a different way. You don't get so invested with a call that you're on that's really difficult. You don't get so like zoomed in. You can actually use your this concept like an accordion. You zoom in, you zoom out a little bit.
Mm.
Like, hey, where am I at in this experience? And you can really start to change things where it's not stress anymore. It's actually the game of life manifesting itself through you. And I think when you give yourself that opportunity to have that accordion effect with your life, because I have paramedic interns, and I always teach them like, hey man, you gotta on these stressful calls, you have to use the accordion effect, or you get sucked in and you
Mm.
just start spinning.
Yeah.
So life will do that to you as well if you don't give yourself the ability and the capacity to hold that length. So when you zoom in, okay, I got to do this. These are my responsibilities. You got to zoom out. Okay, see the bigger picture. What's really going on here? And you start to cue in on these small clues that have created something for this experience to happen. And I'm relating to what the paramedic student, talking to that person. And then so once that happens, you start to you start to become a master at your game. And so that's really what this is all about too, is like being the self mastery of your life and not letting life suck you in. It's not supposed to do that. It's supposed to be fun and it's supposed to be brilliant and it's supposed to be loving. But we have lost touch with, I guess, the Western world is really where it's at too. It's just like capitalism, politics, drama,
Hmm.
electronic devices. And that's what's getting us really locked in. It's really stealing our peace. And I think a lot of the older generations, they hate cell phones, man. They want to keep the old ways of like, sitting and talking to your colleagues. And that's how it used to be. So I think
Hmm.
we had a moment in time that shifted where we just have a lot of issues because of we don't allow those times for integration with our colleagues anymore. And I think that's one of the main things that these older generations they're going to leave and they're going to take that practice with them unless we figure it out. And so I think that's what the fear is on their end. And I think they gave up on us. You know what I mean?
Yeah. What needs to happen? Is it a resurgence to like a revolution where everyone goes back to dumb phones? Like I saw on of all places on social media, like this guy like basically he started I think basically like a duct tape brick. Like he put like a phone case on this like brick and he'd carry it around because it's now 6 pounds and it's like really cumbersome to talk on the phone. And then he's not gonna hold it over his face, laying down on the couch to scroll because he's gonna drop this brick on his face. And then it became like this really beautifully crafted like metal thing. But like, is that what it takes? Is it like, I mean, there are people that have the intention to set guardrails. You want to call them that, right? Like maybe your app times out, right? Like my wife's better at it than I am. Like she'll just get rid of the apps for a while. Like she'll get rid of Facebook, she gets rid of Instagram. She's not going to go on a browser to look at Instagram. She just hasn't, right? And so it drives a little bit of connection between us because I want to share something funny. I'm going to walk over and show it to her. And we're going to be standing next to each other laughing about this thing, right? Like she could do without, but like it's a connection point, right? So it's just different. I feel like there's these ways that we could integrate it, but it's for sure intention. Here's one that I like lately, right? Like we've gone over a lot of different places and kind of talking about like these little hacks and just like these really high level concepts, or really deep concepts that I'm still kind of spinning my wheels on some of the things you shared. But if nothing else, if you're not driving, like, or once you're done driving and you're in a place where you can do this, like think about someone close to yourself that you haven't really caught up with in the last month, right? Maybe you haven't seen them physically. Maybe they're a different time zone. You haven't actually had a phone call. It's just been just surface level text. Like text them like, hey, in the next 2 weeks, let's set a time where we're gonna be on a FaceTime, or we're gonna go get coffee, or we're gonna go see a movie. Like designate that thing. Because if we don't, we just think about it. And like I have all these passing thoughts about somebody that I miss and someone I want to catch up with, but life gets in the way. Well, it doesn't have to. Like we can carve that out. And so it's just like, how can we apply these little intention points and actually build traction, not just, oh yeah, that'd be cool. And then I go back to my normal routine without it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of like peer support. You don't have to be a peer supporter to
Right.
reach out to your really good friends that are peers, you know,
100%.
because we still have to integrate like our experiences, man. And it's helpful when you have a friend who you can talk to who relates. And that's been one of the main cornerstones of the behavioral health issues with first responders is peer support, you know, and like being able to just
Yeah.
like talk to each other, you know, that's one of the things. And like I'm built on the idea that healing comes with human connection and we heal through community. And so we need that piece because you cannot do it alone. I promise you, you will not be able to do it alone. And I am fortunate to have so many friends and mentors and teachers. And now that I am able to do, I reach out to friends all the time. You know, I just have like this really strange thing where I'll have a friend's name pop up or a memory of that person and I'll call them and talk to them. Or I'll text them about like, hey, you remember that
Hmm.
one time this happened on that call, and we start laughing. Like that's love of life right there, and being able to like connect with each other. So I always help people to get out of their own way, but you have to get out of your own way to reach out to the other people, and that's where healing starts. Before you start to like demonize yourself because you feel like you're a failure and you feel like you're not good enough. Like all these things start to manifest in our consciousness if we don't reach out to friends, and we just like have to laugh at it all.
Yeah. For sure. And I'm such an advocate for peer support. I've been involved in my departments in like local regions peer support. But one thing I always say, it's not about peer support being next to your name or being on a call list. It's about a culture of peer support where there's a lot of great peer supporters. There's a lot of great teammates, right? That they're not peer designated, but they just check in. They just check in. They see people, they ask how they're doing. It's being a good, kind human being, right? A good colleague, a good coworker, whatever you want to call it, whatever the space is. But it's just caring, right? Just showing you care, and that goes miles and miles beyond like what a peer support policy or what a peer support team looks like on paper. Like that's like true practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think it's a pretty difficult when we work for speaking for other members who work for really big departments and really big city entities, because our our fire department has like up to like over 4,000 members,
Yeah,
which is a lot of freaking
it's
people, man.
huge. Yeah.
And I think that has been really interesting to watch recently because there's a lot of conflict right now within our department politically, so much
Mm.
stuff going on, and I think that piece has been severed recently. It was starting to build up again, and then it got severed. And I think that's what's eating away at people because of the lack of continuity and the politics. And you have also people who just don't agree on stuff at a union state and at a political within the city state. It's like it's gotten really hairy, man. But if we started to implement the peer support again, I think that would be like a huge resurrection within like our I don't know, man, our morale because it's really gone down south. And I think for everyone after the lockdown, it went down south for a while, and I think that's why peer support started to resurrect itself.
Yeah, man, morale is such a tricky thing, and that's like the $1 million question. I think that will be like, or the people for generations after us will be like debating and picking at. But it's like literally, how do you affect that? And it's like if everyone just brought a little bit to try to improve this thing we call morale, like then it'd be fixed overnight, right? If everyone just tried to show up just a little bit warmer, a little bit more patient, a little bit more empathetic, like there's your morale. That's it. And I've heard it told by a senior boss earlier in my career where I was a sergeant and he addressed a few of us. He's like, "You guys keep talking about morale. You guys keep complaining about morale. Morale is the sergeant's job." And then that went over like a fart in church. At the same time, like I've heard people credit and kind of put on the chief, the execs, like, "Hey, that's the executive's role." I was like, I also disagree. I think it is like it might be a cop out answer, but it's cop out. It's everyone's job. But there are pivotal people. The more influence, the more you can influence anything, which to include morale, to improve the team vision, right? The culture that you're within, the positivity, the attitude. And so if you are a boss, you tend to have some level of organizational influence. And so I would put that on you. If you have any rank as it increases, then the charge of your your role in actually trying to work actively to make it a better place to work and a better culture to exist in, then that is part of your job. And that's not a technical thing that exists on a job announcement or a position detail, with HR, but like that is what leadership is. Like you own more of that. However, we know leaders are not rank and file. They are at all levels and ranks, right? And so the people that are more influential, then absolutely you have to recognize that there's a lot you can do with your day to day, how you interact with people, just how you carry yourself, that you can affect morale. Because I've had this literally happen where a couple of my sergeants came to me concerned about morale and these different things that absolutely were contributing towards negative morale, that I appreciate them coming to me and we're trying to roundtable it because that's what alignment requires, and that's like that is what a team does. And literally the same time, I go to a couple other sergeants and just to check in. And I go to their roll call, their briefing, and everyone's laughing, joking. It's like it fires me up at the end of the day just to be around that much positivity where it seems like nothing could sink their sails. And I'm talking to their sergeants, so I'm like, "Hey, like I'm kind of thinking about morale, and I've become aware that some people it's not going super great, and I just want the honesty and like what can we do?" And they're like, "I have no idea what you're talking about," right? Like they're like things are great. Like I can imagine there's always some people, but I don't think it's affecting us here, and that would be evidence from what I saw. So it's something I was journaling about today, which is like morale is like what we make of it, and it is the collective, right? You can't just exist in your own little vacuum. It's like, but if you believe it sucks, it's gonna suck, especially starting with you, right? That's the lens that you've chosen to put over your filter, like over your eyes, and then at the same time, like if you think that it is okay and has an opportunity to get better, there's that abundance mindset, that growth mindset, then it probably will, because you're going to do something about it and you're going to affect the people around you seeing that, whether they can tangibly articulate that or not, or whether they just feel it and they want to be part of that energy. So morale's tricky, man, but that's the best I can kind of figure out for now.
Yeah, it really is tricky. And I as you're talking, I'm like realizing too, like there's a big gap and a shift that's occurring with this new generation that these old dinosaurs are walking over these dinosaur eggs. Like they're leaving all of them. I don't know about your department or your agency you work for, like, but we're watching that happen in real time. These men and women that have kind of ran the show are leaving, but that there's a pretty large gap of where that torch is being passed down to. And so that's a scary concept, I think, because the new generation are bringing up a lot of new concepts and a lot of innovation with how we treat each other, with how we treat morale, with how we treat our job. And I think a lot of people have been more averse to not sacrificing themselves so much anymore for this career or for when you come into the job. It's been the opposite, actually. People are finding their values more at home. People are retiring earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this whole generation is shifting. Like, and the generation below myself, like, I don't really know what's going to happen with them because some people are leaving now. They'll come and work like 4 or 5 years and they're leaving the department.
Mm-hmm.
And they just said, this is not for me. And that I've seen a lot of that lately, man. So I don't know, like, how do we pass the torch? And it's really through our actions and our behavior. Like there's nothing else that really matters. And you kind of put it well, like where you check in with your subcategory of leaders because that continuity is so important as a leader. And people want to have like interpersonal connections with their leader. They want to make sure like you're not holier than thou. You're not, sitting on at the throne at the high pitch of the hill. It's like we want that connection. And I think when you lose that continuity, man, you lose trust and you lose respect for your leaders. And I think that older generation kind of carried that torch of like, I'm holier than thou. I want you to fear me. And that's how it was. Like usually before a Chiefs, like we feared them,
Mm-hmm.
that's I don't think that's the best way to lead through fear. Like just kind of like that lack of, I guess, sovereignty and integrity. Like I just don't see that being a tool for good leadership. The best leaders I've had, man, I've been able to talk to them like they're a regular person and we can connect on an interpersonal level and
Mm-hmm.
that person knows my family. And that's really where I feel like I can trust someone. So, anyone who wants to jump into leadership and to start involving leadership in their life, like you don't need a badge or like some of like the bugles or whatever it is you guys use on your collar to be that. It starts with your actions. Really, behavior is the number one thing.
Yeah. I mean, you said it right there. It's like, correct. Leadership doesn't work well by fear. It's like no one wants to bring the bad news. The emperor has no clothes. Stalin died in his deathbed because he was like stroking out, and none of his people wanted to check on him because they're too worried that he'd be angry because he was an angry, obviously like homicidal maniac dude, right? So that's how he perished. But that's so much a thing, and you said it right there too, which is trust. Like there's just so much more acumen and vocabulary around like leadership through trust and collaboration, like special teams, like high dialed in performers, like sports, like whatever application or analogy you want to look at, like who is succeeding the best. It's those with trust. It's not with fear. It's not ruling by fear. It's collaboration, right? It's openness. It's communication. So the more demonstrative we can be with that, and the more we can promote that, absolutely, that's what's going to get us through. Yeah, I mean, we are seeing that on our side too, which is like people generationally and the times just they're not carving out a 20-30 year career all the time. And I try to step back and remove the labels of like good versus bad. I think our prior generations, like it was a double-edged sword as well. Like there was this different version of obligation and loyalty and identity that was like, yeah, they're committed, they're going to be in this thing. It ate them up, but they trudged through, and sometimes that wasn't great, right? The outcomes of that. However, now we have more emotionally intelligent generations that are brought up with this vocabulary and this awareness, and like, like I did 4 or 5 years, and like I'm kind of good with it. And so I think that is healthy for us to look at fire service, EMS, or policing. Like, we should be able to congratulate people and thank them for their time and service, like a military career, right? Like, hey, thanks. Like, it's not for everyone for a life. Like, I don't personally know a ton of people that stayed in the military as lifers, quote unquote, or 20-year career. I know a few,
Right.
but a lot of people do their 4 years and they had some good times. They had some great experience. They were able to give back, pay it forward, and then get, you know, college education or what have you, right? Or and then other career opportunities. But to look at it more adaptively, and I think if we're maybe like kind of to bring things together, like if we're attending to the things we need to attend to, which is building resilience, building team, like unifying purpose, and like being emotionally regulated and like not over committed with the identity, then it will probably lend itself better to people working a longer career. But if it doesn't, then we should be prepared to adapt to continue to hire and onboard people that want to come in for 3 to 7 years and be good with it, not be struggling because we didn't anticipate it operationally, organizationally. And so I think there are ways to kind of pay into and kind of invest in all the different facets to make sure that we are protecting and supporting our people, like health wise, but also career wise and life wise.
Yeah, dude, yeah, that was put so well. And, it is very true where instead of judging others for doing their small bits of time, that we judge so much in this line of work, man.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's
Hmm.
it's actually a really shitty habit that we have.
Yeah.
I do it all the time, dude. I just caught myself doing it yesterday. But that's the thing is like I caught myself doing it and I was like, okay, I can acknowledge like why I do that, because it's so contagious how harshly we criticize and judge each other. And even like station wide, like or department wide, like each station judge the next station, like, oh, that station's a piece of shit, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys do
Hmm.
the same
We do
thing.
it too, for sure.
It's funny the yeah, how we do that, but we're supposed to be on this team together and supposed to lift each other up. It's usually not the case. So I think that's usually part of like our competitiveness. You want to talk shit on the next team over because we want to be better. But we cannot be better if we're not connected and start to have more like have this intention of uplifting others and being in a leadership role in that state. But man, it's a crazy world out there, dude. And I'm just very fortunate to try to move things and shift things with the way the old paradigms were and to where we're moving forward. And I think that's one of my main key points for myself, and I think yourself as well, is moving these big mountains over to start creating new pathways of healing and also perspective and leadership. And what's the approach of how we even help these members, because I don't want to have these folded flags anymore at these suicides. Like that's why I started this podcast. We had like three
Yeah.
suicides in 1 year. And I was like, this can't happen. Like something has to be done. And so it was honestly just honest conversations that started helping other people to feel like they were not alone anymore and making it seem like, holy shit, like I am just like that. Like I do that to myself all the time. It's like, it's a lot of vulnerability, a lot of openness, like you said. And that's where true strength is, in my opinion. That's where true courage is, in my opinion, when you carry those qualities. Because those are the ones that we avoid because it makes us feel weak and it makes us feel like we're vulnerable and we're open to any type of attack. And we want to avoid that by protecting ourselves, but protection is limited. When we overly protect ourselves, now we've calloused ourselves with that shield. But once you start to evolutionize yourself into like this unarmored sovereign being, now you can walk with true sovereignty and like live your life with compassion and a full heart and walking through this life with nothing to hide, nothing to fear. And that to me is a true warrior if you can do that. And we, for some reason, over time have like cultivated the opposite. And I think that just comes through just the old ways of living, the old ways of teaching. And so I hope that you and I can also collaborate later on the road, dude, and do more of these because it was a really good episode, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I loved it, and I loved you sharing your purpose and like just a recall of like where this all started, and to know how many positive conversations and be able to share that thought. And sometimes people are going to get this is the mode that it gets kind of wedges that foot in the door to have them think critically and healthfully about how they can navigate their life, their career a little bit better. Blue Grit Radio, like my podcast, was very much similar. Like it started as social media, just trying to put some positive messaging out there. Like 2020 sucked, and trying to focus on what we could focus on, right? Like our personal health, wellness, peer support, destigmatizing some of these mental health barriers, and then the podcast is to reach people through a different format. So It's been a fantastic vehicle. I'm very grateful that I've been able to connect with you, man. Like to hear the work you're doing, the self work and what you're sharing outside, with our community, the greater community at large. I think it's so necessary, and I feel, I'm a little bit behind in some of the learning and the journey. But that's the point, right? We all have our individual journey, and I really appreciate being able to share this collaborative ideas and conversation with you today. And for sure, we got to do more, man.
Yeah, you came up with a lot of great points that I really liked to hear, and it's helpful, and the way you make it practical. I think that's what we want. We want solutions that are practical and that are not far out there. And so my hope is to bring really far out there ideas and break them down into a minuscule state where they're ingestible.
Mm-hmm.
And because there's a lot of practices and things and modalities that are out there that people have been averse to because they don't understand them. Yeah. So once we bring understanding to some things and you break it down, that's an easy, clear-cut way to use. Now you can use it as an individual practice that's helpful to recalibrate your life, recalibrate your nervous system, recalibrate your thoughts and your perspective. So thank you, brother. It was really helpful to hear some of the way you bring things down to like a minuscule level and practical. So I'll definitely, we'll be in touch, brother. And thank you for your service as well. How much time do you have on?
18 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes it feels like a long time. Sometimes it felt really quick. So yeah, my pleasure, man. Likewise.
Yeah, brother. By all means, if everyone wants to connect to his podcast, especially if you're law enforcement who listen to the Grab Lives, connect with him. Check out his platform. He's got an amazing outlook and an amazing outreach. You're in Washington State, so I hope people from all over the United States start kind of like listening to each individual platforms, because they're all different. We all come from like a different experience. You know what I mean? Especially in different states. I know California is in it's going through its own upheaval right now, man. It's wild. So I'm sure I lived in Washington State for a short time in my life, so I know things have changed there tremendously from all my friends who I talked to. So man, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, man. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.